Hi, welcome to Virtu Design Institute's first subject, Interior Design Drawing Techniques. My name's Rahul, and I'm the lecturer in this subject. Today I want to take you through the introduction to the subject and give you an overview of the first task required. Alright, this lecture is going to be about design communication. And what I mean by design communication is how we can go through the design process, record everything for both ourselves and for someone as an onlooker and an assessor. One of the really important things about interior design is that it's not a solo project usually. It's most likely a collaborative process involving multiple people contributing to the outcome. This is why drawing becomes a very important part of the process, so that we can communicate our ideas, communicate our design proposal to a client, communicate it to the others on the design team, and in this case, communicate it to your teacher who's assessing you in this project. So as I mentioned, contributors to the interior design project might be members of the design team, could be your client. Also, within a wider context, we have regulators and the public who also might have a say in certain design decisions. In order to communicate, you really need to be able to visually represent your ideas. And this can be done in many ways, but the most common ways that we as designers communicate is using sketching, drawing, rendering, and modeling. The 2D ways of communication are obviously plan drawings, renderings like the one you see here in this slide, which are created with pen, markers, pencil. And really, you don't have to be limited to any medium. You could use charcoals, you could use whatever you feel comfortable with using. We have then, these days, the ability to use programs that can produce 3D visualizations. Right now, I'm using Blender 3D to produce really interesting 3D visualizations of my design projects, and that's the software that I would like you to learn in this subject. Now, I've chosen this software mainly because it's free, it's open source, and it's downloadable, it's small, it's lightweight. You can run it on just about any system, multi-platform, so you can use it on a Mac, you can use it on a PC. Now, the benefits of that are, if you are employed by a company and they don't have the software that you use, Blender 3D, it means you can just download it and start using it. You don't have to worry about licensing, you don't have to pay for it. It's going to be very useful in terms of being accessible for you as a student and as a professional early on in your career. If you compare that to other software, which could run you, you're looking at $1,000, your employer might not be able to buy that for you, and you might not be able to pay for it to use at your workplace. So, being introduced to free open source software like Blender 3D is going to be very useful for you. Now, what do we use representations for? What do we use drawing and modeling for? Do we use it to communicate a concept, or do we use it to communicate a design resolution? If we reduce the design process down to its really most simple form, we get something that looks like this. First, a client issues a brief saying what they would like. A design firm undertakes that brief and does design research, then produces a kind of design concept proposal. This concept proposal is presented to the client, feedback is sought, modifications are made, then it goes back to the design firm and they start producing more detailed design proposals. So in the earlier design concept proposal, this is very, very abstract. It's less technical, it's less resolved. Then when we get to the detailed proposal, that's when things like CAD drawings come into it, technical drawings, plan drawings, much more in this stage. Then we move on to detailed design drawings, and to a point, once it's approved, to construction. That is a very simplified view of the process. Let's take a look at the difference between conceptual models and more representative models. Here is a quick case study on Australia's most famous building, the Sydney Opera House. I live in Sydney. It's 5 minutes bike ride from me, this building, and it's one of the most iconic buildings in Australia, and probably one of the top 10 architecturally important buildings in the world. All right. Here, if we look at the design process in terms of the early concept phase and then the later development, like I talked about, let's see how the architect of the Sydney Opera House developed the concept through to the more detailed representations. The architect's name is Jørn Utzon. He was a Danish architect, and it's a very interesting project. If you want to go and look up Wikipedia on the Sydney Opera House, very interesting how that project played out. But let's just look for this lecture at some of the early concepts. So you can see the early sketching involved with the Sydney Opera House. Very rough, very quick. Nothing's there in terms of manufacturing detail, anything like that. Just getting an idea out, expressing the concept. And in this case, the concept was, let's leave that open to interpretation, but many people have said sailboats on the harbour. This represents sailboats, or seashells at the beach. Some people even said they look like tortoises. But this is the idea of just using very expressive drawing to get out a concept. Then you can see very quick modelling that Jørn Utzon did to quickly try and sketch out, using hand modelling, the way that the forms could be constructed potentially. Then we moved on to a more intermediate stage where the detail of the design, now you can see that a building is taking shape here. It's not just a rough sketch, it's actually a building is starting to be formed here. You can see in those sketches on the left. And then the modeling starts to become more precise, starts to become more manufacturing oriented. Jørn Utzon produced these because the people constructing the opera house really had no idea how to build it, and he produced this model as a kind of concept towards how it could be prefabricated. Then in the later development, we get to the real kind of representative models where interiors are completely resolved. We have technical things, stairs, the construction, and we have full-scale, accurate, representative models. So you can now begin to build a picture of how this design process works and how I want you to run your projects. I want you to start with these very free, open, free-form sketching and modeling, and then later on in the process, start to resolve your designs down to the more realized versions. So in this course, you're going to be required to choose a site. That's something where you have to be able to access, so you can go there and take photographs and sketch and spend time there so that you can fully understand the space yourself. And I want you to go through what I just showed you, this design communication, creating these hand sketches, the rough models, and then later on 3D models and 3D renderings. Let's show you something that I've done in my design work. Here is a project done in Denmark, a landscape architecture project, where we created a design proposal for a small village. It was basically an open space, kind of disused farmland in the center of a village, and the local government wanted to convert this into a kind of more interesting, more usable space for the community. What you see here is a very quick, rough model we created, just using bits of wood, using bits of plastic, using pins and perspex to represent trees. All of that sitting on a piece of foam core that we stuck the pins into and stuck everything down on. And then we just drew a blue line to represent a stream, and the black line represents a railway track. And you can see it's very quick, very easy to adjust. Not really representative, much more conceptual. If you look at those curved pieces of plastic, they are what represent windbreakers. So these are rows of trees that we would propose to plant there. So you can see it's not purely technical. It's just very, very abstract, very conceptual. This is what you would do in the early stage. And when we're modeling, we're not spending hundreds of dollars producing technically accurate models. We're just using materials easily available to us, what's around us. We just printed the map onto this foam core, and then we used string here to represent the stream, and again we used plastic and pins to represent trees. You know what you can do? You can put a bunch of scrap pieces like this in a little box and take it with you when you go to your site. Then when you get on your site, you've done some sketching, you sit down and you could just maybe model the forms. That block there, that one in the center, represents the big building. Then we have blocks around representing the smaller buildings. We have small bits of wood representing the walkways or the roadways, and fencing represented there. I mean, just use this quick modeling just to help you understand and examine the spatial elements in your site. Once we've done all the preliminary sketching and we've come up with a concept proposal, we can start getting into the real detail of the design. What you're looking at here is a rendering that I created in Blender 3D. This is the software that I would like to show you how to use so that you can visualize your design ideas. I used the tutorial that I followed to produce this, and I think you can see that how Blender really is useful to simulate lighting and to quickly get the idea of a space out onto a visualization. So now I've run you through the kind of basic introduction to the course. Go and download Assessment Task 1, read it thoroughly. If you have any questions, I need you to get onto the classroom forums, post them there, and I will answer them, and I will take you through any misunderstandings you have about the brief. So don't delay, get onto Omnium, get onto our student classroom, download the Assessment Task 1, and get to it. Thank you.